claim that our eyes will just be created a slightly different from what they are when we talk, we see things are not normal.
Welcome to Strange Familiars. Hope everybody's doing well. On tonight's show, I'm going to be talking with Adam from Weekly Creep Podcast. He's got a bunch of stories to share with us, including some weird nights at the Hellfire Club, or the ruins thereof outside of Dublin. Before we get to Adam, I'd like to thank Vitamin D Zine. It just arrived at the P.O. Box. I'm not sure if they want me to give their address or if they have a website or anything. It's a neat little zine, but they gave a really, really nice write-up to Strange Familiars in there. So thank you to Vitamin D. If you want me to put a way for people to contact you in the show notes or something, give me a shout and I'll add it in a future episode. And just a reminder that we are supporting Kaya.life. That's a nonprofit at Pine Ridge Reservation. I think I forgot to mention them last episode. Going to try to keep mentioning them at least every episode up until episode 500, when we're going to play the stories we collected from Pine Ridge. So if you can afford to give, it's Kaya.life, Kiya.life. All right, let's go ahead and get to my talk with Adam. I'd like to welcome Adam to the show. How you doing tonight?
Hey, not too bad at all things considered, you know.
Well, that's not an American accent.
And this is my telephone voice, actually, so this is my more American accent. Yeah.
Can you dial it down? Like, seriously, like willfully?
It depends on who I'm talking to. Probably the more I get into the story, the thicker it'll get, because so I'm from Dublin, Ireland,
Okay,
and Dublin itself has about like 6 different accents in it. And I'm kind of middle of the road. Mm-hmm. My cousins will call me posh, but other people, real posh people, will say that I am not posh. More common. So, yeah, it depends on who I'm talking to, definitely. But there'll probably be a couple of words that might trip us up as we go along the story. So
that's all good. I think people hear a lot of Irish accents with Strange Familiars. That's fine.
Yeah, it's actually, ironically enough, I just started a new job a couple of weeks ago and haven't been able to listen. And so I had my hair down the other day and I was sneaking my AirPod in. And I just happened to press play on the episode with Brother
Richard. Yeah.
Brother Richard. And yeah, it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, he's a definite treasure. That's such a fantastic resource for us. I'm very, very blessed to have him as a repeating guest. So, well, I think at least as I went over your email tonight, I know we've been going back and forth for a while trying to arrange this. I'm not sure that I found the specifics of what we're talking about, so I'm kind of going in cold here. So are we talking about multiple things or one incident or?
Basically, it's kind of my quote unquote paranormal kind of journey over the last few years.
Okay.
Look, I'll start from the beginning. Basically, in 2019, I moved back home for a little while in between, like visas and green cards and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So you're in America. You moved back to Ireland.
Yeah, I was living in Canada actually at the time.
Oh, okay.
Moved to Ireland, waiting to come to America.
Gotcha.
And while I was there, I basically rekindled a bunch of old friendships from like my high school days. I'm one of the only ones who actually left, so everybody else was kind of still in that little bubble. But in doing so, it turns out one of my best friends and his now wife were just really into spooky stuff. So we were like, oh, look, this is perfect. His wife grew up near what's known as the Hellfire Club in Dublin.
Okay.
Now, I have researched the history and I had friends who are actually historians helped me out. And basically, the Hellfire Club was just this debauchery club in the Dublin mountains. Rich people, rich dudes back in the day. It was, all sorts of nastiness going on. And some stories, honestly, it just sounds like a fun place. So
I think Ben Franklin was involved with that, if I remember correctly.
He was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's a big link because I think there was one I'm sure there's many, but from what I remember, there's one in France, and there's definitely the Hellfire caves or whatever in England as well. So basically just a boys club, very similar to the stuff that's going on today that Alex, what's his name, is uncovering. I can't think, the big conspiracy guy. Yeah. So naturally with those kind of places, there's stories that have some truth, stories that are way blown out of proportion, and then the ones that are kind of in the gray areas. So growing up 20 minutes from there, had never actually been there. And so one evening, me, my friend and his wife were like, come on, let's go for a stroll. It's a really nice evening. And, you'll get to see what it's all about. I think I had my 2 little sisters with me as well at the time. Little sisters, we're all adults, you know what I mean? So yeah, we went up and I had a little cheap voice recorder with me. I was basically doing the Zach Bagans thing. I was like, let's go catch us a ghost. Ended up having just the weirdest experiences with EVPs that we weren't expecting. To be honest, we didn't really expect anything. Nothing had ever happened there before with my friends or anything. And I ended up seeing a cat, right? Totally normal. I was convinced it was an actual cat. Now, looking back on it and diagnosing every different possibility, it wasn't a cat, okay? It just wasn't. I've come to accept that now. But there is a legend of a cat at the foot of the Hellfire Club where the old house, the kind of guard house would have been. Anyway, so this just set me off on a path of we have to go back to the Hellfire Club. We're going to catch this thing. It's going to be amazing.
So is this a building, an old building or something?
Yeah, I'll send you pictures because it's definitely hard to explain. It's a ruin of a building.
Okay, all right.
And it sounds much bigger than it is. And at one time it would have been much bigger, but just over the years, the ground has literally come up around it.
Gotcha.
So
yeah.
But it is it has a foreboding presence. You can see it from Dublin. You're looking up into the mountains and it's just this big cavernous building. So that in itself kind of makes it scary. It's literally the haunted house on the hill.
Sure, yeah.
And then to walk up there as well, I'm probably not doing it justice, but it takes maybe, if you're in good shape, 20 minutes to get up around the track. And because we typically would do it in the dark, you literally walk all the way around the back and up to the top. So as you near it, you're seeing glimpses of it through the trees, and it's illuminated by the city lights and stuff. So it's a perfect ghost story setting, which I think is why I was even more skeptical of it, to be honest. So anyway, we went back and forth a few times, and on one night, I won't go into the full details of the story, but basically we started audibly hearing stuff ourselves. Typically when we would get there, we would do kind of a recce around the building because it's also a haven for kids who are up to no good. It's a great place to get in. You can light a fire, drink some beers, and the police 9 times out of 10 aren't going to bother walking up the track. So we would always just make sure, hey, no kids here. We're not going to get in a fight with some young guy or whatever.
Right.
And so this one particular time, it was me, my friend, me and my friends. But I was with my friend's wife and we walked into the back room. And this time we had tried to protect ourselves and stuff. My friend's self-professed witch, and she just did basic kind of cleansing rituals, right? We're in a pagan country anyway, so that's what she kind of grounds herself in. And it was lovely, to be honest, but I think it had the opposite effect where it actually put us all on edge going up. Anyway, we walk into the back room, me and my friend's wife, and something hissed at us, like sounded like a cat or whatever. And I re-listened to the episode of our podcast that we did on it just to verify that I had all the details right myself. And I texted my friend's wife to be like, listen, I know I've asked you this before, but this is definitely what we heard, right? And she actually was laughing because she ended up Googling Irish snakes just to make sure. And there is absolutely none.
St. Patrick took care of
got them. Yeah. So it was just the trippiest thing because we didn't react the way like we didn't just run out of there, which is if that happened to me now, I would run out of this house. Like,
sure.
We just kind of accepted it. And we looked at each other, acknowledged it, and we're like, that was weird. Let's keep moving. So we decided to start our kind of, investigation in that room. And all of these sounds kept happening, basically like footsteps and stuff, but it would lead us from one room to the next. And we didn't realize that at the time until it got to the stage where we were upstairs in this building and we heard what sounded like a bowling ball, okay, or like just rocks being rolled back and forth along the ground. Now, the ground downstairs is mud now, so like literally none of this makes sense. But anyway, so when we heard that, we were like, oh no, we're getting punked. Like, this is kids, like actually just trying to scare us. And at that stage, then we went downstairs, went outside of the building, circled around just to be sure. And of course, there was no one there. But it was at this point then we realized, wait, this thing has gotten us out of it. Like we were thinking black and white, like we're in somebody else's house. They didn't want us there, and it's tricked us into coming outside now. So it's got what it wants, basically. Like I said, our whole energy was off. Everybody was getting really angry with my one friend who was just like happy to be there. And for no reason. Like we just kept trying. He would say like, hey, do you want to do this or that? And we'd be like, will you just stop? Like, it was ridiculous. But it was at that point anyway, we were outside the building, freezing cold. This was like December or January. And I looked up in one of the windows and I saw a shadow person. Basically, it still doesn't feel real. It had one red eye and like the outline of a cloak, say, but it was just stepping out of the window as if it had been standing there watching us. And I caught it just as it walked off.
Wow.
So that was the one red eye. It was just a side profile. Like, it's not like it was some cyclops or something. But that is what actually got me, like, just scared the absolute bejesus out of me. And I was like, okay, this is like funny games is over now. We're going to go. But my one friend wanted to stay and go back inside. All of this back and forth. And it got to the point where we were like, look, there's two kind of outside rooms. So we were like, we settled on, let's go in and check out these. I had like a spirit box or something. But we would turn it on. Every time we turned it on, we would hear actual noise, like not from the spirit box. And it would cause us to turn it off again to be like, wait, what was that? What was that?
Yeah.
And again, not realizing at the time, but it felt like something was egging us on to be like doubting ourselves, thinking it was a real person, all of this. And right towards the end of this evening, we were in the last room and we were all standing around saying like the most bizarre stuff. We were in this little room and I was saying stuff like, I need to stand by this doorway. I don't know what, like this is totally out of character for me. Like, I'll also say like, I'm an electrician by trade. Like, I very much like live in the real world usually.
I was too back in the day.
All right. Okay.
Electric and telephone.
Right on. But yeah, so we're standing there. My friend's wife literally has her hand on me, pulling me into the room, saying, no, I need to pull you in here. And like, just all this like weirdness was going on. Meanwhile, the friend who we were all angry with was looking at us all like we were crazy. He was totally fine, totally normal this whole time. And then a drink can, like a soda can, just rolls across just in front of the doorway. And we all were like shooketh for a second because we were like, what is that? Realized it was a drinks can. And we were like, oh God, like we're so on edge. And we started laughing. But then we realized that it had rolled through like a pile of garbage, like bags, like empty bags of chips and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were like, there's no wind. Like it was dead, like freezing cold, just no wind or anything. And we were like, okay, no, that was weird. Like, let's just go because this is too much. There's all these really small things. Well, seeing that thing wasn't small, but like just strange things. And then as we were leaving, my friend who had been normal all night was the last one out of the room. And suddenly he just goes, okay, yeah, let's go. And so at this stage, we're almost running back to the trail. And I turn around because I feel him pulling at my hood on my jacket. And as I turn around, his flashlight, he like throws it on the ground. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, but there's actually too much distance between us. He couldn't have reached me even with his flashlight. And he was like, something just knocked my flashlight out of my hand.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. So, and then sometime around now as well, his wife goes, my side, I think it was when we got back to the car, she's like, my side is burning. Like, this is weird. Anyway, we got home and we're laughing at ourselves because we were like the Scooby-Doo gang, like gunning it out of there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We get back to the house and we're like all layered up because of how cold it was, like 2 hoodies, jacket, whatever. My friend's wife takes off her leather jacket and hoodies and she's like scraped all up her side. They're just small, but like noticeable scrapes. And everybody had their own personal experience. So at the time, it was very much like, okay, well, we've gone to the haunted house and had this experience. And I don't know, it was kind of just black and white. This is ghosts
Mm-hmm.
and whatever. So around the same time, stuff started happening I was living with my parents at the time for that year. And I grew up in that house. Nothing ever that I can remember weird ever happened there. And then I started hearing, like, I heard my dad come home one day, Friday afternoon. The building sites back home closed a little bit early on Friday. So traditionally you could go and collect your check, but now it's just a great excuse to get out an hour early.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on my own in the house and I grabbed my guitar. I was like, this is cool. I can be as loud as I want without bothering anybody. I played one song and then I heard my dad walk in very loudly. He has his tool bag and his work boots and stuff. He's also an electrician. And I'm like, oh man, like I just sat down. I'll put this down, I'll get down, make tea, say hello to him, and then come back up. And I get downstairs and there's nobody there.
Mm.
This is all in and around, like, I want to say the first time we went up was like November or something like that. And this is over the course of about maybe 2 months, 3 months. Other weird stuff started happening. My bedside lamp came on one night. It wasn't a smart lamp or anything, just a regular switch. That woke me up. And then another evening, I have a cousin who died when he was only 20. And I dreamt he was playing with my feet at the end of my bed. And he was laughing at me. And I woke up convinced that like my feet were just out of the covers or something. And I literally was like touching my blanket and it was wrapped under my feet. All this and like smaller stuff was happening to the point where I actually like came out and said out loud in my bedroom, this is my space. Like if that is you, Luke, or Granddad or whoever, you're more than welcome to be in the house, but this is my kind of safe space. Anyway, this is all within the last couple of weeks before I move. And then one day, like I even heard footsteps follow me up the stairs. And all of these things are happening. And I'm like, have I like unlocked something? You know, like, and then I moved to America and all that kind of stopped. There was one evening as well. I mentioned fairies in that email. We went to this other kind of ruined castle. Again, it's not as impressive as it sounds. It's like 5-10 minutes from my house. And we were there maybe for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. It was just too cold. And this night it was windy. So the recorder was useless, all of this. But we kept seeing what looked like flashlight beams, or not even the beams, but like where a flashlight beam would land.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you mentioned this on one of your recent episodes, which is why I wanted to bring it up. This castle ruins is in a farmer's field. So we were like the only people basically that are allowed to have guns in Ireland are farmers. And it's usually to keep people off their land. So we were like extra like on edge, keeping an eye out for actual people. and we keep seeing these lights. We all saw it. And I kept saying, I have this like impression of somebody crouching behind. There was where the old stairs used to go up, but the stone is all broken, as if someone was just peeking out of the doorway and then hiding. And all night I'm saying, like, this is really like trickster and like weird. I didn't have like a lot of this vocabulary then because it was all very new to me. So with that, anyway, I move over here and everything kind of just stopped. It was like a bubble burst in terms of paranormal. And so I've been here now 4 years, and I got here just before like everything went into lockdown and stuff. So I did what everybody else did. And first I tried to write an album, and then I realized how difficult that was. And so then I started up a podcast with my wife, and it was just, I wanted it to be really light and like more historical, like we'll tell ghost stories and true crime, whatever, get all the information, knock it out in one episode and be done with it. But then I got really into like John Keel and basically I kind of blame Hellier as well for.
Yeah. I mean, those are two big gateways into this stuff. Keel and Hellier. I mean, you combine the two of them.
Yeah, and I feel like this might be pushing it out a bit much, but like I know in Hellier they're constantly talking about this feels like an induction and all of these synchronicities. But I feel like for a lot of people watching it, this is their induction into that.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So anyway, for the last 4 years, I've been, I don't know if you can see in the camera, like I've got like my bookshelf here just full of like cool books that like my listeners have sent and other just random ones that I've picked up along the way. 90% of it is just poltergeist cases and stuff. But I started to kind of connect the dots. I'd be reading like, I don't know, even like famous cases like the Enfield poltergeist case, This House is Haunted by Guy Playfair. I'd be reading that and they'd mention like something completely in passing, and I'd be like, wait a minute, like that happened to me in one of these old locations and I never thought about it.
Yeah.
Until I've just read it now. And so I completely fell out of love with the whole paranormal thing. I was like, you know what? I was getting all these stories sent to me every week and stuff, and I was like, I actually just don't believe in anything. Like I completely burned out, and I was like, I guess not, you know.
So hold on, let's explore that for a second. So reading about and hearing about these things that you had actually had happen to you made you less interested in it.
Yeah.
Wow. See, for me, it always like fires me up. I'm like, oh, that happened to me. And so why do you think that is?
I think this probably isn't the right word. I feel like I oversaturated myself.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
To be fair, one of the main reasons actually why I listen to Strange Familiars is because I know you've mentioned it before. You've got a really strong like Catholic faith, right? And for me, being from somewhere that's completely anti-religious now, like basically my whole generation back home are just disenfranchised with the church.
Yeah.
So that's how I grew up. And moving to Texas, where every second billboard is a sign for the Bible or something, it really took its toll on me. And now I feel like I'm in a place where I have respect for it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's thanks to you, honestly, in a big way. So anyway, all of this stuff was going on, like this kind of internal arguments, basically.
Yeah.
And towards kind of, I want to say February of last year, I was like, you know what? Let's go make a ghost. Like, I feel like now what we experience in the Hellfire Club, in basically every setting that we've ever experienced anything, I don't think that those places were necessarily haunted. I think we haunted them.
Okay.
We went there with the expectation, and like this isn't like an original thought or anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now I feel like this is my understanding, and all of these spooky things that have happened are basically like my fault, or like maybe not my fault, but because of my ideas going in. And like I've never really had like a random encounter, you know. It's always been like a very well, we're going here on Sunday night, so you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, around February 2023, I was like, you know what? We were booked to go back home to Ireland in August for my cousin's wedding. He's my best friend as well. So it was like not some random thing. It was a huge gathering of just all like school friends, family, and everything. So it was going to be great. And we knew that we'd be meeting up, obviously, with my other friend and his wife. And they're always like the spooky couple that we do spooky things with. Like we spent a night on a prison island off the coast of Ireland. I think the first time we went back after when I was allowed to leave the US, because but before you get your green card, you can't leave.
Okay.
Anyway, so I got in touch with them and I was like, hey, I read this story. It's by an Irish social worker, and my friend is also a social worker. So again, these are well-educated people, you know. The husband is about to become a lawyer and she's a social worker. And so I'd read this story. It was called The Boy They Tried to Hide. And as far as I know, and I've spoken with the author, it's as true as his word. This little boy was in the woods coaxing out real living boys to basically go away and play, very much like old-fashioned fairy stories. He was luring them out in the middle of the night. The parish priest was involved. The police were involved. It was a huge story that was kept very hush-hush, and I feel like this book hasn't been justified. So he's since, I think he sold the rights, or he's in the process of selling the rights for a movie, so he's not talking about it as much. But I got in touch with him and I was like, look, can you tell us where these woods are? We'll keep it a secret, but I want to go camping, basically, and see if we can. He called the little boy ghost Thomas. I was like, I want to see if we can find Thomas, right? This was my big grand plan. And like to prove to myself that these things are figment of our own imagination, basically, right? I was going to say, let's just go. We're going to find Thomas, even if he's not there. So he got back in touch with me. He was very excited, but he was like, I can't, like, I'm literally legally sworn to not tell anybody where the location is. So I was like, okay, I'll do you one better. We're going to go to all of the locations and treat each location as if they are the woods where little Thomas is. And this is going to be over the course of a few years. And we're going to find Thomas in every location. It's a guaranteed. So I'm still not against the plan, but I didn't realize at the time that I was starting to have all these synchronicities. Like even down to, at the time I was working in a kind of a photo digitization place. So I was just sitting in front of a computer screen listening to podcasts or watching movies all day long. And it would be, I'm trying to think now of the name of the Jack Parsons, right? This is just one example that I happened to write down. I listened to Jim Harold's Campfire. And this dude came on. He's like, yeah, I've got a funny story for you. I actually lived in the house just down the road from where Jack Parsons lived. And I'd never heard of him before. So I had a quick Google. I was like, oh, how interesting. And then I go and I turn on the next podcast that I was listening to. And it had just been released. And it was an entire series just about Jack Parsons.
Wow.
So, and this was like within like minutes. You know what I mean? So stuff like this kept happening. I had like this little notebook that I would keep and just like write stuff down. My coworker at the time was like an aspiring filmmaker, so we'd be like bouncing ideas off each other. Silly horror movies. I was like, dude, this is going to be so cheesy and so fun. This is what we should do, blah, blah, blah. And it got to the point where I would like have dreams and I would like, wake up and I'd go, dude, this is a cool story. Like we could make this into a one scene story and it'd be cool. And he was all about it, but naturally we never had the time to do it. So finally, towards August of last year, right before we were supposed to go home for the wedding and go camping and all this, these synchronicities were getting to the point where like one morning I turned on whatever podcast, I don't even know what it was, and they just mentioned George Knapp. Actually, it might have been an old Art Bell or so, I don't know. And as they said George Knapp, a truck pulled up beside me with Knapp autos. You know what I mean? And this was every day. And I was like, I had left that job. My head was fried. I was like, dude, what is going on? And then I had this dream, completely weird. I went to work one day and the supervisor took me to a place that was supposed to be like, I had never been before. And it was covered in spider webs everywhere. And, but these huge spiders were like running around. I woke up and I was like, why am I dreaming about Eric? Like, I didn't think anything else of like the dream. I was like, why was Eric in my dream? How strange. Then within like the same 2 weeks, I had another dream that I was walking through a field, and again, it was spiders everywhere. And I was kicking these spiders out of the way, almost like they were water, but it was insects, spiders. And there was an owl in the tree line just staring like into me. And I woke up, and I'm pretty sure it's in here as well, like in more detail. But I woke up and I just had this weird feeling, and I was like, I need to write this dream down because it was so strange. Anyway, I get to work and I meet with Eric, and I'm like, hey, dude, I can't find this part. By this stage, I was building electrical panels. And he goes, oh, yeah, come with me. And he takes me to the place that had been that first dream where I had.
Wow.
And so I was like, I literally, the closest thing I could feel was like, dude, this feels like I've had a panic attack before, maybe like once. This feels the same as that. And obviously, like, I didn't say anything to him. That whole atmosphere was very like toxic masculine energy. Like, I didn't, and like they didn't know I was like even doing podcasts and stuff. So I just had this really weird experience, and I kind of brushed it off. I think I told my wife, and then that Sunday I was due to meet my filmmaker friend. I was actually just helping him with a photo shoot, and he goes, hey, my buddy John, his family have property just outside of Houston. It's like an hour away. Let's go. I need help. I was like, absolutely. I still don't have many friends here, and I never get to like leave Houston to go on like an adventure. So I was like, dude, this is going to be sick. I didn't realize until the day after that the field that we were in was the field where I had seen this owl.
Wow.
And as if that wasn't enough, I had already told my buddy about the dream because I was like, dude, this owl was freaking me out. But as we were walking in, I'm one of these anxious, over-prepared people. So I have in the back of my car, I had like my work boots and a blanket and a milk crate, all this like random crap for, and like a first aid kit. So we got to this field and the grass was like up to our knees because the dude's granddad like rotates for his cattle or something. And I was the only one with boots. So I put on my work boots and I trudged through into the middle. And literally there was, I'm sure you've probably seen them. We don't have them in Ireland, but like wolf spiders.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Huge, man. And I was freaked out. But I think I was so freaked out by the reality of it that I wasn't able to think, like, you know what I mean? I didn't join any dots.
Yeah.
And we had this model in a white kind of almost like wedding dress. And she was terrified because these insects just launched at her. This white dress, I guess, was just
more
like
more than one.
Oh no, dude! Like, I'm not joking. I've never experienced this. Like, as I walked through, I was literally seeing like grasshoppers, spiders, like jumping, and in between. So my buddy had like 2 film cameras, a digital camera, and then I was doing like just some kind of background video. Literally in between flashes and stuff, I would run over and bat spiders off the dress, and like. That in itself, like, whatever about ghosts, I don't deal with spiders well. Snakes I'm fine with because I didn't grow up with them. Spiders freak me out. So anyway, all of that to say, I suddenly realized, like, wait, I'm having these, like, prophetic probably isn't the right word, but like I'm having these dreams that I'm now living in real life. And I've written them down prior to any of this happening because something told me to. So I feel like I'm having a nervous breakdown at this point. I'm like sitting there, I call one of our listeners in Canada is like very spiritual, and she was just kind of talking me through like the symbolism of it and all. And it wasn't landing with me. Like what she was saying was all like, I'm sure very well read and researched, but it wasn't hitting me. And so then I came back and I was talking it through with my wife, literally sitting where I am now. And she was there trying to like watch TV, just trying to relax. And here's this lunatic being like, I don't know what it is, blah, blah, blah. I had written down one other dream almost like the year before, I want to say. And it was for a silly movie idea. Well, when I woke up, I thought this will be like a fun horror sketch. And it was basically these kids were going to joke summon they were going to do like an internet summoning spell that they found, which involved like wrapping up an actual like play doll as a mummy. And then, they would say whatever words, go into the other room and play like hide and seek, like that rice doll fad that went through like Reddit a few years ago. Anyway, the kicker was at the end of the dream, the summoning spell worked. And so it was like a big jump scare moment. And as I was realizing all this, sitting in this chair telling my wife, it all kind of clicked into place. I was like, I don't think we're supposed to summon Thomas. We're not supposed to do this.
Yeah.
And again, I know how crazy all this sounds, right? Because I went back home and my friends were like, hey, I thought we were going camping. And I was like, dude, we can't. I was having dreams. The little boy was in my bathroom, all this kind of stuff. So that night, my wife was like, dude, you need to like go have a shower, calm down, and then we're going to like meditate. And we're not usually like that. We're very much like get home, watch The Sopranos, and get into bed.
Sure.
But I was literally a grown man. I'll be 33 this year, so I was 31 at this stage. And I was like pulling back the curtain in the shower because I was so convinced that this little boy was in my bathroom.
Wow.
And I was, again, just felt absolutely bonkers. And I was trying to talk myself down and being like, no, I am now that person who I'm constantly saying, you're taking this too far. Like mentally, this has gotten a hold of you. But when I say, like, when I moved over here in that bubble burst, after that night, nothing. Absolutely nothing after that. No more synchronicities, no more dreams, nothing. Like I'd still have the occasionally, nightmare or whatever, but nothing that had that same feeling. I haven't written a dream down since then. And so then it kind of sat with me and it went on for months and I was like embarrassed about it because I was like, that was a frantic episode that I went through. And really, I feel like there was no need for it. So in November, we took a trip to Estes Park in Colorado, right? We actually, me and my wife met in a Stephen King chat room online. Yeah. So that's why when I lived in Canada, we met online. And at that time, it was much easier for me to fly down here for a weekend and stuff. So the Shining Hotel was always on our list. The Stanley Hotel, sorry. But it just happened that one of our favorite bands, Amigo the Devil, was actually playing there for a weekend. I think they did either 2 shows or 3 shows, I can't remember. And we were like, dude, no expense. Like, we have to go and do it. Like, this is it. So we booked everything and we went. And it was like, obviously we're there. We're going to do like the hokey ghost tours and all this stuff. Because we were going as well for a weekly creep, the podcast, I was like, this is going to be an easy episode. It's just going to be a bunch of people saying like, oh, I think I heard somebody cough in my bathroom when I stayed there or something.
Right.
So I like researched the history of the town, like, because that's my thing. I like to get the actual like real history of these places. And if there's like 5% ghost stories, cool. But we know the actual story. And so I had all these like random facts already kind of like learned off to record the episode. And then we went and we did one tour. One tour was like a Stephen King tour. And like they didn't record The Shining or anything up there, you know what I mean? So they've really like spent a lot of money buying like movie props and stuff just for like this town wouldn't be there if it wasn't for this attraction.
Right.
And that tour was lovely. It was great. But as they're telling the story, like some of it was just like, oh, I actually read a different version of that. And it was like, different years or something. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And then we did the ghost tour. And the kid doing the ghost tour was great. I'm not trying to malign him or anything, but it was, if you had young kids, it's a perfect ghost tour for them,
Right, yeah.
basically. Not these absolute nerds that are sitting in the front row with all these facts, you know. But we're walking down into the service corridor, and again, like at this stage, I was over it. I was actually just tired. I was like, all right, cool. We're gonna go back to the hotel and just chill out. But as you walk down, the hotel is built on the bedrock of the mountain. So it's literally like, I guess craggy would be the word, underneath in the service tunnel. And in my head, I saw a little girl just popping down behind a rock. And I was like, okay, there I go again, spooking myself. The kid tells us all these lovely stories about, blah, blah, blah. The kids used to run down here. And then he shows like 3 or 4 photographs that other tour goers have like taken on their cell phone or whatever. And he showed me one, and like literally my blood ran cold. It was literally the little girl that I had seen before. And it was one of those, like even down to eye shine in the camera or in the photograph, and in this like little, I don't want to call it a vision. I don't want to give it that much like romance, you know what I mean? But I saw that. The only difference was the hair in my vision was a bit more bigger, basically bushier, wilder looking. But I got back to the hotel, and me and my wife had actually gotten like separated on the tour, so she was standing down the other end. And we get back to the hotel, and I'm like, "You're gonna think I'm mad." I saw that picture, and she didn't pick up what I was saying, and I was like, "No." Like I literally saw this little girl in full animation, like crouching down behind the rock where she had been like peeking out to see who was coming. And she was like, "Oh, that's really cool." Whatever. But I was like, yeah, but now all of these other times when I've been doing stuff, or like specifically at like, quote unquote haunted locations, and I'd have these like weird ideas, like say at the Hellfire Club when I'm going, I need to stand over here, or at the ruined castle where I was picturing this little weird creature thing hiding behind the wall. I was like, was that like a psychic, I don't know, manifestation, or am I just thinking about it too much now? I don't know.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, I guess before I start asking questions, has it continued? Is there more?
Just the only other thing that I can even think of recently. See, I have an awful habit of thinking I've experienced something when in actuality it was the people around me. One of these like kind of hokey ghost tour things that we did before I even moved here, but again was with that couple, and my little sister came with us, and there was a medium there, and the medium was like, we would go around station to station doing like, oh, you can try doing what's it called? When you have like the crystal and a pendulum kind of thing. So one of the stages was a medium, and she wasn't doing readings or anything. She was actually just there to show us like EVPs and something else. And she randomly starts describing my younger cousin who passed away. He was actually killed he got sucker punched, basically. And he never woke up from it. So it was like a tragic thing. He was only 20. I wasn't as close to him as my sisters were. But this medium starts describing him down to a T, out of nowhere, completely unprovoked. And my grandfather, who passed away a few years ago, had throat cancer. He had one of the words keep escaping me tonight, but basically he couldn't talk for like the last 10 years of his life. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And she just described these two people completely at random. And I would, like, me and my sister were standing beside each other in the dark. So I was like, oh my God, like she must have picked that up from me. It wasn't me. It was my sister. Absolutely. Because other than these weird instances I'm talking about, I feel like I'm completely closed off. And so my wife would have interesting things. She's heard this high-heeled person walk through the house at night. And I heard it then like a week later, but I only got to hear a little bit of it. Anyway, all that to say, the only other thing that I've experienced recently is when we were back home, when we were supposed to go camping that same trip. Unfortunately, I've actually been back to Ireland 3 times this year just from family emergencies. So those times we didn't have time, like we were going to the hospital and funerals and all that kind of stuff. So we didn't do much exploring. But this time we had nothing to do, and I said, "Hey, let's go find that castle ruins that Carl and Sarah brought me to years ago." It was still bright out, so it was just a nice little walk for me and my sisters and my wife, and we couldn't find it. Right, typical. I'm kind of putting it down. Now, this I am kind of being sarcastic, but it was like fairy-ish. We literally couldn't find it. I was on the same street, but we found a little walking trail, and like this is in the suburbs. Like you're in a farmer's field, but like you can see houses from the field and from the whole trail. And we walked maybe like 20 minutes in, and then decided, well, we can't get to it. Let's just walk back. And as we were walking back, I hear a car door slam. And at the same time, it was me and my youngest sister here. My wife and middle sister were about 30, 40 yards behind us, maybe. And when I heard this car door slam, the two of them react outlandishly and like, "Whoa, did you guys hear that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it was a car door slam. Like, what are you talking about?" And they go, "No, no, no. Something just like growled at us from the trees."
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And I was like, complete and utter, like, man in the horror movie thing going, "You guys are crazy. I heard a car door slam." There's nothing that would really growl at you in those woods. The biggest thing we have are small deer, and you would see it because they're pretty clumsy going through trees. So anyway, I poo-pooed the idea, and we're walking back to the car. They're getting salty with me at this stage because they're literally going, "No, we know what we heard. We both heard it." And I'm saying, I literally saw a man with his golf clubs in his back garden from the trail. It was somebody slamming their car boot, their trunk, whatever. Anyway, a few months later, listening to an audiobook in work, it's Flying Saucer to the Center of Your Mind, right? It's John Keel. Anyway, I wasn't even paying attention. These books can be very boring anyway. The audiobooks can be painstakingly boring at times. And yeah, as I'm like going around wiring some panel or doing whatever I'm doing, he starts describing the likenesses between UFO and fairy encounters. And he describes people hearing a baby crying in the woods as a very common experience, when other people will often hear car doors slamming, and how the different people at the exact same time can experience two completely different set of things. And it was one of those, I had to come home and I was like, Dulce, my wife, was like, "I'm really sorry." "I'm sorry I doubted you. I wholeheartedly believe that was some strange encounter."
I don't know if you've ever heard it or heard me talk about it, but I recorded the car door slam in the middle of the woods.
I don't know if I heard it, but I've heard you talking about it. Yeah,
we were 3 miles into the middle of the woods by a river, by the Susquehanna River, and there's just a car door slam. And I went out to the river to see if is there a boat out? I mean, it sounded like a corridor, but I thought, well, maybe if there's a boat out there, maybe there's, there's something on it that would sound like that. No boats around. It was wild. I got it recorded that time. The other time I heard it, I was with another guy hiking on Toad Road, and I heard it, and he didn't hear it. And it was loud. It sounded like it was right in my right ear as we were walking in the trail. And I was like, "Did you hear that?" And I'm looking for, 4-wheel drive. And you couldn't possibly get a 4-wheel drive out there, but I'm looking, just maybe there's one somewhere. And he didn't even hear it. So yeah, I think it's definitely a thing.
No, and it's like, I feel like the things that have been happening to me, I feel like this it's like a big lesson in patience. And again, not to keep harping on about Keel, but it's one of the things that when I first got into it, I was like, dude, he's comparing notes from like 10 years apart. And I think I'm starting to get that now. It's not about the in your face thing. Like I said, I'm also not, I am still an atheist, like pretty hardcore. And so I definitely don't put it down to like, it being a demon or a ghost or whatever.
Right.
I do still think it's got a lot to do with whatever's in your noggin,
Yeah, I mean, so not being an atheist, I'm fully on board with that. I don't know that I think it's a both end kind of thing. I think there is something external, but it certainly works with whatever we have going on in our head.
Right.
In my opinion. Obviously, I don't know. But in my opinion, it's like some kind of interchange happening there on a level that we're not fully understanding or conscious of. But so I was very interested when you said, let's go make a ghost, if you had pursued that experiment any further.
So I'm not going to lie, I was scared like a little child when everything kind of came to a head. But the impression that I got was not to do it. It was just, you're not ready. Mm-hmm. Right. And again, like, that sounds so deep.
Yeah. Well, this particular, was it Tommy? Was that his name?
Thomas. Yeah.
Thomas. Yeah. That seems a particularly nasty thing to mess with. You know what I mean? Given the stories associated with it.
Yeah. And like, God, I wish I could do the story justice, but like, realistically, like, I think I did 2 or 3 episodes like a few years ago. I don't remember now every detail, but like, the book is The Boy They Tried to Hide. And if you're interested, like, absolutely check it out.
Yeah.
Because
I actually wanted to write the title down.
I do think you're right, because at the same time, I don't not believe in, like, the regular ghost stories, like, oh, well, this is the white lady of such and such. Maybe it is. Mm-hmm. Like, I am never going to say, oh, I know for sure one way or the other. But at the same time, I do feel like 70% of the time, maybe it's, our own kind of projection, or like you said, like, whatever is using us as a.
If I find out, and I don't think I'm ever going to get the answers. I don't think they're available to us at any point. But let's say we get the answers at some point. If I find out that it's all coming from us somehow, that makes it no less interesting to me. Like, it's just as interesting to me that would be. People have talked to me about Ghostbox. Oh, that's just you projecting your thoughts. If so, that's amazing. Like, that's really cool. So I'm down with that. Like,
like, how do we harness this?
Yeah, exactly. I'm fine with that explanation. That doesn't upset me at all. Yeah, I don't need there to be an external thing. I think there is. I also think it's an internal thing as well. But I don't need there to be that for me to be interested in it. So I'm not. My feelings wouldn't be hurt if it ended up being, all like Jungian archetypes and stuff, and we're doing it all. I'm fine with that.
Right.
I lean that way heavily. I think a lot of that's happening. I think there's something external, and this is just my gut. I just feel like there's something external as well that's playing with those aspects of ourselves. It's like, how can I use this person's imagination and whatever archetypes go way back and, like, to achieve whatever goal they're trying to achieve, or if it's just to mess with people, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, and even on the most, well, I say basic, but like, people who have been abducted, abductee stories where it's like the 3 or 4 days are missing, but dude, 3 or 4 days are still missing, regardless of whether you were on a journey. This is, you know what I mean?
Yeah. When I was younger, I still do. It's just not anywhere near as bad as it was, IBS. And somebody says, "Oh, that's all in your head." I'm like, yeah, okay.
It's still there.
Yeah, but it's like 1,000% real. Like the effects of it are 1,000% there. It's like, okay, it's in my head. I'm down with that, but like, where do we go from there?
Right, exactly.
I'm still having real world effects from this thing that's in my head. So
yeah. But no. So my big thing now is, and I think again from the stuff that I've moved towards now, like reading, and because of programs like yourself or like yours, it's definitely given me a much broader feel for everything. Like, I love when I go home now, like, my dad is very like black and white, you know what I mean? But if you start to talk about ghosts, he's like, don't talk about that in my house. You know what I mean? So my big thing now is like, well, Dad, Bigfoot's a ghost, right? Mm-hmm. Or I'll say big whatever.
Yeah.
It drives him nuts. But honestly, I'm into that theory. Like, so
I mean, the longer I look into that, the more I'm coming down as some kind of spirit. I don't see how it can be anything else, but somebody can prove me wrong. I'd be happy for that as well. That whole thing's just as cool to me, whether it's a real animal or a spirit, but I'm just leaning way far into the spirit these days.
Yeah.
The other thing I found interesting, when you got your hood pulled, I had my pack pulled one day. I was walking in the woods with a fellow, and it was pulled really hard, and I thought he was messing with me. And I whipped around to say, like, hey, don't do that. Like,
Yeah.
don't mess around like that. And he was too far back. He couldn't have, like, it wasn't him, So I could feel, like, if you can imagine somebody grabbing your pack, how it would gather the fabric. I could kind of feel my pack tighten before it pulled. I could feel, feel like a hand grab my pack and just yank down hard. And I whipped around, and he's back, I don't know, too far to have touched me, like 10 feet, 15 feet. He's rolling a cigarette too. There was no possible way it was him.
So it's funny actually that you mentioned that, because like, again, this is over, I guess, like the last 6 years, maybe, if even. Basically, the relationship I was in before, that person just wasn't into this at all. So I never really explored it until now. But I've had like very few cases. But like I was saying, like, when you start to look at the broader kind of timeline. But my wife and I went to Edinburgh. And again, talk about like hokey ghost tours. This is one that I will recommend to everybody. It's, you go around the graveyard, into the vaults. Everybody does it when they go. It's a lovely experience. I actually happen to be wearing the same black jacket. It's still my rain jacket that I keep in the trunk of the car now. And we were inside one of the crypts in the graveyard at night. And this is very much like, your one's, the lady's flashlight is dying the entire time. Like, she's doing it on purpose. She is. But you're still like leaning in to hear the story. But the entire time, there was somebody kept playing with my jacket, with the hood on my jacket. And it was so dark that I actually couldn't see behind me. But when we had been in the vaults previously on that same tour, the lady turned out her flashlight just to give you an idea of how dark it would be. And as soon as she turned it out, a woman, a real life woman, jumped onto my foot and like held me. It was just her natural instinct. When the light went out, she just went to the closest person and huddled. So I just assumed that this was like a big dude standing behind me, and I kept brushing my hood against them. And then right at the end, your one turns her flashlight on just to say, oh, over here. I think people have like actually fallen through the grave years ago. And she shines her light back. And finally I get a chance to look back, and like, there's nobody there.
Wow.
And again, one of these experiences where if I say it out loud, it's like, why wouldn't you just run out of this situation? But when you happen it, or for me personally, it's like your brain just doesn't kick in all the way or something.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my wife again after we left, I was like, you're not going to believe this. But in fairness to my wife, not that she's gullible, but she does have a lot of, she makes me feel better about these things, basically, I'll say.
So that period where you became like somewhat disenchanted, were you doing the podcast at that period?
Yeah, I still was. So I've had to take a break just this year because basically I was working like 60 hours a week. And then at Christmas time, I got a call to say that my grandfather wasn't doing well. And so I had to go back for a couple of weeks, and I tried to keep it up, but it wasn't a good show. I didn't have the time to put into it, basically. And I don't like not being able to give it my all, because we have a small fan base, but they're so like super loyal.
Yeah.
So anyway, then I came back. My grandfather actually died, and we had to go back again. And then my grandmother, his wife, passed away just last month. So we had to go back again. And so in that time, I finally started a new job. So I'm going to have regular people hours. So I'm hoping that by September time, I'll be back in full swing. And I'm starting another project as well. So I'm actually interviewing a guy. His house is haunted, and he was really shy about it at first. So I met him at his workplace, and we had like an interview, and he wasn't telling his wife. But since then, something has happened where he had to spill the beans to his wife, and now they've invited me to their house where all of this stuff is happening.
Nice.
So yeah, and like, I'm not going in trying to like cure them or anything. He knows it's purely like a journalistic venture. So I'm excited. I'm like I said, like, I'm back in kind of full tilt now. So
was it difficult to keep it going when you were feeling like sort of disenchanted?
Oh, sorry, disenchanted. Yeah, I'm sorry. I completely went off the thing. No, I was just more robotic about it.
Okay, yeah.
I feel like, because as well with us, like, I could do like a month or 6 weeks on a true crime story.
Mhm.
It's not very often, but typically whenever I, got fed up doing this poltergeist and that poltergeist, because it felt like the same episode sometimes.
Sure.
So I would try and spend a long time. I actually did, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn. It was not my favorite story because of the work I put in, but just my favorite story I ever read. It was The Alive, the plane crash in the Andes.
Mm-hmm.
I did a pretty long series about that last year. And funnily enough, that was at the time, right at that time is when I went like peak mental breakdown over Thomas. So I wasn't even focusing on that type of stuff at that time.
When I started this, Wes Germer from Sasquatch Chronicles said, Tim, I know you love Bigfoot, but I'm telling you, don't do just Bigfoot. And at the time, I thought he was trying to throw me off the trail. You know what I mean?
Right.
He wanted to get all the Bigfoot stories for himself. Not that he's that kind of person. Like, I knew him then.
Yeah.
But I just thought, like, maybe he's, but he wasn't. And it was the best advice he could have given me. Because that variety, that ability to say, okay, I've done a lot of this kind of story. Now I want to do a story about a hermit. Now I want to do this. It really helps keep my interest in the podcast. And I really thank him for pointing me in that direction. It was great advice, Wes. I'm so happy. I took his advice on that.
Yeah.
Because it makes things really, really, the variety, it makes it really, really better for me. Because, just like you said, if you just do ghost story after ghost story after ghost story, it's just, okay, I need a break. Last summer, I had to tell people, like, enough sleep paralysis stories for a while. Like, I just had too many.
Right.
And it was just, like, the same show again and again. And, well, thankfully, got a bunch of other stories. And, that's the advantage of not being locked into one thing. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, whenever you get bored, just do a historical story or something like that.
Yeah, and like that's definitely the way. Like that, when we start it back up again, I'm gonna be doing some other like fun projects. Like my whole thing with this, like I said, like as an electrician, I never worked with even like a computer before, and now I'm like an absolute nerd for camera stuff, microphone. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just hoping that it can turn into whatever else, and like that, keep me in this ghost nerd business, so that I can hear like, personal stories and stuff like that. And then do my own nerdums and connect the dots myself. Like that's my absolute favorite thing, honestly.
So your podcast is called The Weekly Creep.
A Weekly Creep, yeah. It's been a couple months since we released, but we definitely will be back. I'm hoping for September time. And yeah, we cover a bunch of stories. If you're into the Boy They Tried to Hide is on there, and all sorts. I can't even think now off the top of my head. I'm actually really bad at like trying to promote us. But yeah, just a whole lot of
people ask me like, "What's your favorite episode?" I'm, "Whoa, hold on a minute. Like I've done, getting close to 500 here. Hold on a minute. Now I'm gonna have to think, And
right? Typically,
I usually name something from the last 20 because like it's just too hard to pick anything out. And
yeah,
worse when somebody's like, "What episode was blank on?" The person talked about this. I'm like, I have too many episodes to choose from. I don't remember the numbers. But so where can people find you? Yeah, you everywhere podcasts are?
Everywhere, yeah. If you're into like actually watching your podcast for the last, I don't know how many episodes, I've actually been editing them and putting them on YouTube. Again, just to keep the practice going, basically. And then I was doing it for some other podcasts as well, just their editing stuff. But yeah, if you want a really small following on YouTube, but if you just want to see what our mugs look like,
Yeah. And what's your YouTube channel?
It's the same, just Weekly Creep. All anywhere you're trying to find us, Weekly Creep, yeah.
I'll try to put links to all that in the show notes. Thank you so much. Man. Thanks for
having me.
Thanks for your stories. Let me know if you go back and end up going and looking for Thomas.
It's gonna happen. It's going to happen eventually. When I'm mature enough.
All right, Adam. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, man.
If you like Strange Familiars and you'd like to help us continue to make the podcast, you can become a patron at Patreon. It's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. All of our patrons get commercial-free versions of the weekly episodes, as well as extra content. We do at least one exclusive episode of Strange Familiars every month for our patrons. Sometimes we do more. Again, if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/strangefamiliars. We will be raising the lowest tier to $5. It's $4 a month right now. We'll be raising that to $5. But if you get in now, as long as Patreon lets us do this, you'll be grandfathered in. So in the past, when we raised it from $3 to $4, a lot of people just stayed at that $3 tier, and they're still at that $3 tier. And as long as they keep paying that every month, they won't have to pay any more. So if you get in now at $4 a month, you're locked in, again, as long as Patreon lets us do this. And when we raise the rate, you'll stay at the $4 rate going forward. For those of you on Apple Podcast, we have a subscription program there as well. It's called Patron of the Strange, and Apple Podcast subscribers get the commercial-free weekly episodes as well as the bonus content every month. All right, we've got no Allison, so we've got no Curiosity of the Week. I'm sure she'll be back next week or whenever with more curiosities. But I would like to remind everybody of our Etsy shop. Our shop name is Lost Grave over there at Etsy, but if you go to Etsy and you type in Strange Familiars, you should see our stuff come up. We have Strange Familiars t-shirts, stickers, mugs, patches, and more. My books are there. If you get them from us on Etsy, they come signed. Artwork, originals, and prints. Allison has various bits of ephemera up there, some Victorian scrap and some photos. She'll be adding some more as well. Check out everything in our Etsy shop. And again, thanks to all who support us via Etsy. That's another way to support the show and get some cool stuff besides. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon with more Strange Familiars. Strange Familiars is a production of Dark Holler Arts. Intro and background music is by Stone Breath. If you want to hear more or purchase music, go to stonebreath.bandcamp.com. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/strangefamiliars, where you can join the Strange Familiars gathering group. We're on Instagram @strangefamiliars, one word, no underscore. Please give us a like and a follow there. For Strange Familiars merch, go to strangefamiliars.com/merch. And for everything else, strangefamiliars.com.
Circles of our own, walking in the sun. patterns woven through our lives, silver threads trail behind, sewing soul to mind. And the sound of our feet echoes through the graves below. Dust and bones, hear the drones of the song cycling above. And the past, joined in song, and a stitch is sewn. And we feel the spider's web twisting round the dead. Death to life, by dream or waking sight, seasons pulse, blinking eye, or by the lantern's light. See the ripples spreading out in the holy well. Hear the water on the stone, hear the prayer finding home. Vine on branch, flame on wick, finger upon lips, feet on sand, moon and sky, silently we stand. Morning stars rise and fall, far above us all. Night to day, vigil stay, until we hear the birds. Oh, sound the hymn of the birds, circling their halo rings above your head. In the sky, hawks cry and sparrows sing. Feathered wings lift them high, all through the skies. Then we see you and I, reflected in their eyes. And we pace the sound of our feet echoes through the graves below. Dust and bones, hear the drones of the song cycling above, and the path join in song, and the stitches sewn, and we feel the spiders well twisting around the dead. By dream awaking sight, seasons pause, blinking eye, or by the lantern's light, see the ripples spreading out in the holy well, hear the water on the stone, hear the prayer finding home. Silently we stand, morning stars rise and fall, far above us all. Night to day, vigil stay, until we hear the bells. Sound the hymn of the birds circled in the halo ring above your head. In the sky, hawks cry and sparrows sing. Feathered wings lift them high all through the sky, and we see you and I reflected in